The supply wagon came twice a year and it was already late. Caleb stood on the ridge above the timber camp, watching the dust trail snake up the mountain road. His breath fogged in the October cold. 6 weeks until the first real snow, maybe less. The highlands didn't forgive mistakes, and winter was the mountain's way of killing everything that didn't belong. He needed a wife. Not for warmth or company, he'd gone 5 years without either and managed fine. He needed someone who could work, someone who understood that survival up here meant bleeding into the soil every single day. The advertisement he'd sent down to the valley towns had been blunt. Strong woman wanted for mountain work. Must endure hardship. Weak hands need not apply. 3 women had responded. He'd picked the one whose letter had the fewest words and the most experience listed. A widow from a mining family, someone who knew what cold and dirt felt like. The wagon crested the final slope, and Caleb started down toward the camp. The settlement wasn't much. 12 cabins scattered across a clearing where the trees finally gave up trying to grow. Men who came up here were running from something or running toward isolation. Either way, they weren't the welcoming type. They'd gathered near the wagon now, more out of boredom than curiosity. Entertainment was scarce when your nearest neighbor was 2 miles of vertical rock away. Caleb pushed through the small crowd. The wagon driver, a grizzled man named Hendricks, was already unloading supplies. Rourke, Hendricks jerked his chin toward the back of the wagon. Got your mail order bride. Don't call her that, Caleb said automatically, though he wasn't sure why he cared. What should I call her? The poor bastard who signed her life away? Someone in the crowd laughed. The canvas flap at the back of the wagon twitched, and a hand appeared, small, pale, trembling slightly. Then a woman climbed out, moving like every muscle hurt. Caleb's stomach dropped. This wasn't the woman from the letter. She was maybe 25, dark hair falling loose from what had probably started as a neat bun. Her dress was gray wool, city-made, already dirty from the road but not dirty enough, not the kind of worn-through fabric that came from real labor. Her face was flushed, her breathing too fast. Altitude sickness, probably. She'd come up too quick. She looked at the camp, at the men, at the mountains rising like teeth on every side. Then her eyes found Caleb. He knew what she saw. A man who'd gone feral in the best way, tall, lean, weathered down to something harder than the rock around them. His beard was trimmed close, his hair tied back, but there was nothing civilized left in his expression. Caleb Rourke? Her voice came out steady despite the breathlessness. Yeah, I'm Mara Ellison. The name meant nothing to him. Where's Catherine Brennan? Dead. Mara gripped the side of the wagon like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Pneumonia. 3 weeks ago, I took her place. The hell you did. I paid for someone who could work. I can work. One of the men snorted. Another said something under his breath that made the others laugh. Mara didn't look at them. She kept her eyes on Caleb, and there was something in that stare that didn't match the rest of her. Something that didn't bend. You look like you've never seen a hard day in your life, Caleb said. You're wrong. Am I? What'd you do before this? So? Teach children? Her jaw tightened. I was a clerk. Records and correspondence. Christ. Caleb turned away. Hendricks, take her back down. Can't. The driver was already climbing back onto his seat. I'm 3 days behind schedule. Snow's coming for the pass. She stays or she walks, but I'm not making another trip up here till spring. Caleb rounded on him. You brought me the wrong woman. I brought you the woman who paid for passage and had a signed contract with your name on it. What she does with that contract ain't my problem. Hendricks snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward. Mara stumbled as the wagon pulled away, then caught herself. She stood there in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by men who looked at her like she was already a corpse. 3 days? Someone said. I give her 3 days. I'll take that bet. 2 days. She won't make it through the first cold snap. 1 day. Look at her. She's already dying. Mara's hands curled into fists, but she didn't speak, just stood there, swaying slightly, her breath coming in short gasps. Caleb could see the panic starting to set in. The realization that she was alone, surrounded by strangers, on a mountain that would freeze her solid by December. He should walk away. Let her figure it out. She'd made her own choices. But then she looked at him again, and he saw it clearly this time. Not panic, not fear, rage. The kind of rage that came from having nothing left to lose. "You're not staying," Caleb said. "I signed the contract." "I don't care. You won't last a week." Then I'll die in a week. But I'm not going back down." Her voice dropped, went sharp. "I can't go back down." There it was. The truth under everything else. She was running. Caleb studied her. City clothes, soft hands, a way of talking that said education, maybe money once, and now she was here, gasping for air at 8,000 feet, with winter breathing down her neck. "What are you running from?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter?" "If it follows you up here, yeah, it matters." Mara's expression went cold. "It won't." "You sure about that?" "Yes." She was lying. Caleb could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes flicked toward the valley below like something might crawl up after her. One of the men spoke up. "Rourke, you keeping her or not? If you don't want her, I'll take her." The way he said it made Caleb's skin crawl. "No." The word came out harsher than he intended. "She's mine." Mara flinched. "By contract," Caleb added. "Nothing else? You understand?" "Yes." "Good." He turned and started walking toward his cabin on the far edge of the clearing. "Follow me. Try to keep up." Caleb's cabin sat where the tree line finally broke into bare rock. It was small, one room, stone foundation, timber walls chinked with moss and mud. A chimney made of stacked slate, firewood stacked under a tarp. It looked like what it was, a shelter built to survive, not to comfort. Mara stopped at the door, breathing hard. The walk from the clearing had been maybe 200 yards, but the altitude was strangling her. "Inside," Caleb said. She stepped through. The interior was sparse. A bed in one corner, a table, and 2 chairs, a stove, shelves with supplies. Everything functional, nothing extra. "You'll sleep there," Caleb pointed to a corner near the stove. "I'll bring in another bedroll. We don't share the bed. We don't share anything unless it's necessary for survival. You pull your weight or you leave. Understood?" Mara nodded, still catching her breath. "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Can you chop wood?" "I'll learn." "Can you shoot?" She hesitated. "No." "Then you're useless in a fight. Can you at least start a fire without burning the place down?" "Yes." "Good. That's something." Caleb moved to the shelves and pulled down a tin cup, filled it with water from a bucket. "Drink, slowly. You came up too fast. Your body's screaming for oxygen it can't get. You'll feel like hell for a few days, maybe a week. Some people adjust. Some people don't." Mara took the cup with shaking hands. "And if I don't adjust? Then you die." She drank. The water was cold, clean, tasted like stone. She finished half the cup before lowering it. "You're not a kind man. Kindness doesn't keep you alive up here. What does? Work, preparation, knowing when to quit." "I don't quit." Caleb almost smiled. "We'll see." He left her there and went to check his traps. The mountain had deer, elk, mountain goats, enough to survive on if you knew where to look. He'd already started smoking meat for winter, but it was never enough. You always needed more. More food, more wood, more time before the snow came. When he returned 2 hours later, Mara had started a fire in the stove and was sitting on the floor beside it, her back against the wall. Her face was pale, her eyes half closed. "You look worse," Caleb said. "I feel worse." "That'll pass. Maybe." She opened her eyes. "Why did you say yes?" "Back there. You could have let them take me." "No, I couldn't." "Why not?" Because those men would have used her up and left her broken, and Caleb had seen enough of that in his life. Because despite everything screaming at him to cut his losses, something about her refusal to quit reminded him of himself 10 years ago, stubborn and bleeding and too angry to die. "Because you signed a contract," he said instead. "That means you're my responsibility until you break it. And if I don't break it, then you're stuck with me." Mara almost smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "I've been stuck with worse." The first night, she vomited twice from the altitude. Caleb heard her outside in the dark, retching into the dirt. He didn't go to her. She wouldn't want that. The second day, she tried to help him split wood. She lasted 20 minutes before her hand started bleeding. Caleb sent her inside to wrap them. The third day, she made it an hour. By the end of the first week, her hands were wrapped in cloth and her breathing had started to even out. She still looked like hell, but she wasn't dying as fast. Caleb watched her from across the clearing as she struggled with the axe. Her form was terrible. Her strength was worse. But she kept swinging over and over until her arms shook. One of the other men, a trapper named Voss, wandered over to where Caleb was checking his rifle. "She's still here," Voss said. "Yeah. Thought she'd be dead by now." "She's stubborn." Voss spat into the dirt. "Stubborn don't mean strong. She's slowing you down. You should send her packing before the snow comes." "She stays." "Why?" "She's dead weight." Caleb didn't answer. He wasn't sure he had an answer. That night, Mara cooked dinner, venison stew with wild onions and the last of the potatoes. It wasn't bad. She sat across from him at the small table, eating slowly. "You're getting better," Caleb said. "At what?" "Breathing, moving, not collapsing every 5 minutes." "High praise." "Up here it is." She set down her spoon. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on what it is." "Why did you come up here? To the mountain?" Caleb stared into his bowl. "Same reason as everyone else. Wanted to be left alone." "Running from something?" "Maybe." "You?" Mara's expression went carefully blank. "Yes." "Going to tell me what it is?" "No." "Fair enough." Caleb had his own secrets buried deep enough that the mountain couldn't dig them up. They ate in silence. 2 weeks in, the first snow came. It wasn't much, just a dusting that melted by noon, but it was a warning. Winter was circling, getting ready to drop its full weight. Caleb started working faster. More traps, more wood, more preparations. Mara tried to keep up, but she was still too slow, too weak. He found himself compensating for her without thinking about it, splitting extra wood while she hauled water, checking her traps when she was too exhausted to make the climb. It pissed him off, how easily she'd become a liability. But it also impressed him, how hard she fought to stop being one. 3 weeks in, she killed her first rabbit. Caleb heard the trap snap and found her standing over it, staring down at the small body caught in the wire. Her face was pale. "You going to skin it?" he asked. "I don't know how." "Then learn." He knelt beside the trap, showed her how to release the mechanism, how to make the first cut. His hands guided hers through the motions. She didn't flinch, but he felt her trembling. "It gets easier," he said. "Does it?" "No, but you get used to it." She finished the skinning with shaking hands. That night they ate the rabbit. Mara didn't touch her portion. "You need to eat," Caleb said. "I killed it. And it'll keep you alive, that's the trade." She picked up her fork, stared at the meat. "I don't want to be someone who kills things." "You already are. Everyone up here is. You kill or you starve. Those are the options." Mara looked at him. "Is that what you tell yourself?" "It's the truth." "No, it's what you need it to be." She took a bite, chewed slowly. "There's a difference." Caleb didn't have an answer for that. 4 weeks in, a storm rolled through that dropped 6 inches of snow and didn't melt. The temperature plunged. Ice formed in the water bucket overnight. Mara woke, shivering despite the fire. Caleb found her huddled near the stove, wrapped in both blankets, her teeth chattering. "You're not dressed for this," he said. "I know." He pulled out an old coat from his supplies, thick wool, lined with fur. Too big for her, but it would work. "Here." She took it, pulled it on. It swallowed her, but the shaking stopped. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just don't freeze to death." That night, the temperature dropped below 0. The fire in the stove burned hot, but the cold crept in through every crack. Caleb woke to find Mara sitting up, staring at nothing. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too cold." He sighed, got up, grabbed his own blanket, and moved to her corner. "Come here." She tensed. "What?" "Body heat. Only way to stay warm when it gets like this. I'm not trying anything. I'm trying to keep us both from freezing." Mara hesitated, then moved closer. Caleb wrapped the blanket around both of them, kept a careful distance between their bodies, just close enough to share warmth, nothing more. "Thank you," she whispered. "Stop thanking me." They sat like that for an hour, not speaking. Eventually, Mara's breathing slowed. She fell asleep sitting up, her head tilting toward his shoulder, but not quite touching. Caleb stayed awake, watching the fire, feeling the cold press against the walls. He'd made a mistake bringing her up here. She wasn't strong enough, wasn't ready. When the real winter came, she'd break. But then her hand moved in her sleep, curled into a fist, and he remembered the way she'd looked at that mountain the first day, the fury in her eyes. Maybe she'd surprise him. 5 weeks in, they ran out of coffee. Caleb hadn't planned for 2 people. His supplies were stretched thin already. Mara noticed immediately. "We're low on everything, aren't we?" "Yeah." "Will we make it?" "If we're careful." "And if we're not?" Caleb didn't answer. She started eating less, giving him the larger portions. He noticed but didn't call her on it. Pride was sometimes the only thing keeping people alive. 6 weeks in, Caleb went to check the far traps and found 2 of them destroyed. Not by animals, by people. The wires were cut clean, the stakes pulled up. Someone was sabotaging him. He came back to the cabin and found Mara grinding dried meat into powder. She looked up when he entered. "Something wrong?" "Someone's been at my traps." Her expression shifted. "Who?" "Don't know. Could be anyone in the camp. Could be someone passing through." "Why would they do that?" "Because they don't like me. Or they don't like you. Or they're bored and cruel." He set his rifle down. "Doesn't matter why. What matters is we just lost food we can't replace." Mara stood. "Show me where. I'll help you reset them." "You don't know how." "Then teach me." They spent the afternoon rebuilding the traps. Mara's hands were clumsy, her knots loose, but she learned fast. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping again. "We need to find out who's doing this," Mara said. "We will." "And then what?" Caleb looked at her. "Then we make sure they don't do it again." Something flickered in her eyes. Understanding, maybe approval. They walked back to the cabin in silence. 7 weeks in, the sabotage continued. More traps destroyed, firewood stolen, a bag of flour slashed open and left to spill into the dirt. Caleb started sleeping lighter, his rifle within reach. Mara stopped sleeping at all. He'd wake in the middle of the night and find her sitting by the stove, staring into the flames. "You need to rest," he said one night. "I can't." "Why not?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then, "I keep thinking they'll come." "Who?" "The people I ran from." There it was. The truth finally surfacing. Caleb sat up. "Tell me." Mara shook her head. "You don't want to know." "If it's going to get us killed, I need to know." She looked at him, and the firelight carved shadows across her face. She looked older than she had 7 weeks ago. Harder. "I worked for a man named Victor Haynes," she said quietly. "He owned half the railroads in the Eastern Territories, contracts with the government, millions in his accounts, and all of it built on lies." "What kind of lies?" "The kind that got people killed. He was cutting costs, using cheap materials, bribing inspectors. Bridges collapsed, trains derailed, workers died, and he covered it up. Every time." Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. "And you found out?" "I kept his records. I saw everything, and She stopped, swallowed hard. "I copied it. All of it. Every document, every ledger, every bribe. I took it to a lawyer I thought I could trust." "What happened?" "The lawyer worked for Haynes. He told him everything. Haynes tried to have me killed that night." The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the trees. "How'd you get out?" Caleb asked. "I ran, hid, changed my name, found Catherine Brennan's advertisement. When she died, I took her place." Mara's hands twisted together. "I thought if I came far enough, high enough, they wouldn't find me." "But you're not sure." "No." Caleb leaned back against the wall. "This man, Haynes, he have money, more than most people see in 10 lifetimes. Then he has reach. He can hire people, send them anywhere." Mara's face went pale. "You think they'll come here?" "If he wants you dead badly enough, yeah, they'll come." She stood abruptly, paced to the door, stared out into the darkness. "I shouldn't have told you. You should send me away." Too late for that. Why? Because you're stuck with me now, and I don't leave people to die alone. Mara turned. You don't even like me. Doesn't matter, you're mine to protect. Contract says so. The contract doesn't say anything about fighting off killers. Then we'll call it a bonus. For the first time since she'd arrived, Mara laughed. It was short, bitter, but real. You're insane, she said. Probably. Caleb stood, checked the load in his rifle. Get some sleep. I'll keep watch. Caleb? Sleep. She did, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't wake screaming. Cheers. 8 weeks in, winter arrived in full. The snow came down in sheets that erased the world. The wind screamed. The temperature dropped so low that water froze solid within minutes of leaving the stove. Caleb and Mara stopped leaving the cabin except to grab firewood. They burned through their stores faster than he'd planned. Food got tighter. The cold got meaner. And then, on a morning when the sky was white and the air hurt to breathe, Caleb saw the tracks. Fresh boot prints in the snow, leading up from the valley, circling the cabin. Someone had been watching them during the night. He didn't tell Mara, not yet, but he started sleeping with his rifle loaded and his knife under his pillow. That night, something scraped against the outside wall. Mara woke instantly, her eyes wide. What was that? Quiet. Caleb moved to the window, peered through a crack in the shutters. Nothing but darkness and falling snow. Then a shadow moved, just for a second, gone before he could be sure. Someone's out there, Mara whispered. I know. What do we do? Caleb thought fast. If they were being watched, confrontation would come eventually. Better to control when and where. We wait, he said. Let them make the first move. And if they try to kill us? Then we kill them first. Mara's breath hitched. He looked back at her and saw the fear in her eyes, but underneath it, something else. Something sharp. Can you do that? He asked. If it comes to it? She didn't answer right away. Then, yes. You sure? I killed a rabbit, didn't I? A rabbit's not a person. No. Mara stood, moved beside him at the window. But a person trying to kill me isn't really a person anymore. They're just another predator. Caleb studied her face. The softness was gone, burned away by cold and fear and survival. Good, he said. Remember that. They stood together in the dark, watching the snow fall, waiting for whatever came next. And outside, hidden in the storm, the hunters waited too. The shadow didn't come back that night, or the next, but the tracks remained, circling wider each morning, like something testing the perimeter. Caleb started counting, 12 sets of prints, maybe more. Hard to tell with the wind filling them in. How many? Mara asked on the third morning, standing beside him as they studied the snow. Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. He turned back toward the cabin. We need more ammunition. We don't have more ammunition. Then we need to be smarter about what we use it on. Mara followed him inside, shaking snow from her coat. The one he'd given her had become her second skin now, worn and stained, but keeping her alive. She'd changed in the last 2 months, lost the softness in her face. Her hands were calloused, her movements economical. She didn't waste energy anymore. If they're watching us, she said, they're waiting for something. Yeah. What? For us to make a mistake, get careless, leave an opening. Mara sat at the table, her fingers drumming against the wood. It was a new habit, one that appeared when she was thinking hard. Or they're waiting for reinforcements. Caleb stopped. He hadn't considered that. You think Haynes sent more than one group? I think a man with that much money doesn't take chances. If he sent someone to kill me, he sent enough people to guarantee it. Her voice went flat. And he'd wait until they were all in position before moving. How long? I don't know. Days? Weeks? Depends how far they had to travel. Caleb moved to the window, scanned the tree line. Nothing moved except the wind. Then we fortify. Make it harder for them to get inside. We can't stay locked in here forever. No, but we can make them regret trying to force us out. They spent the afternoon reinforcing the cabin. Caleb nailed shutters over the windows, leaving small gaps to shoot through. Mara helped him stack firewood against the walls for extra insulation and cover. They moved supplies away from the door, created a clear line of sight to anything that might try to come through. By nightfall, the cabin felt more like a bunker. "You've done this before," Mara said, watching him check the firing angles. "Something like it." "Where?" Caleb didn't answer. Some memories stayed buried for a reason. Mara didn't push. She was learning when to let silence sit. That night, Caleb took first watch. He sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, listening to the wind tear at the walls. Mara slept fitfully near the stove, her hand curled around the handle of a knife he'd given her. Around midnight, something hit the roof. Not snow, something heavier. Caleb was on his feet instantly, rifle raised. Mara woke, scrambled up. "What?" Quiet. Another impact, then another. Rocks. Someone was throwing rocks at the roof. "They're trying to draw us out," Caleb whispered. "Don't go." "I'm not." The rocks stopped. Silence stretched. Then came the sound of footsteps crunching through snow, circling, deliberate. Caleb moved to the east window, peered through the gap. A figure moved between the trees, barely visible in the darkness. Then another. They weren't hiding anymore. "How many?" Mara breathed. "At least 4, maybe more." One of the figures stepped into the clearing, close enough that Caleb could make out details. A man, tall, wearing a heavy coat and carrying a rifle. He stopped 20 yards from the cabin and just stood there. "Rourke!" The voice carried through the cold. "We need to talk." Caleb didn't answer. "I know you're in there, and I know you've got something that belongs to Victor Haynes." Mara's face went white. "Send out the woman and we'll leave you alone. You don't need to die for her." Caleb felt Mara's hand on his arm. "Don't answer him." "I wasn't planning to." The man in the clearing waited. When no response came, he laughed. "Suit yourself. We can wait. Winter's just getting started, Rourke. How long you think your supplies will last? How long before you're eating boot leather?" Silence. "I'll give you until morning to think about it." The man turned, started walking back toward the trees. "After that, we come in and take her." The figures melted back into the darkness. The clearing went still. Mara's breathing had gone shallow. They know. They know I'm here." "Yeah." "How?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is they're not taking you." "Caleb, you heard him. If you give me up, I'm not giving you up." "They'll kill you." "They'll try." He checked the rifle's load. "Might not succeed." "This isn't your fight." Caleb looked at her. In the dim firelight, she looked half wild, all sharp angles and desperate eyes. 2 months ago, she would have broken under this pressure. Now she was calculating, planning. "You made it my fight when you signed that contract," he said, "and I don't break contracts. Even if it kills you, everyone dies. Might as well die for something worth a damn." Mara stared at him. Then, without warning, she moved forward and gripped his arm hard. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this." "I know, but still, thank you." They stood watch together for the rest of the night. The attackers didn't return, but their presence hung in the air like smoke. When dawn broke gray and cold, Caleb made a decision. "We need help," he said. "From who? The men in the camp won't lift a finger for us." "Some of them might, if the price is right." "What price?" "Meat, supplies, whatever we can spare." He pulled on his coat. "Stay here. Keep the rifle. Anyone tries to come through that door, you shoot them." "Where are you going?" "To see if I can buy us an army." Mara grabbed his wrist. "Be careful." "Careful doesn't live up here, but I'll try." The settlement looked different under siege conditions. Men stood in their doorways watching the tree line. Everyone had heard the shouting last night. Everyone knew something was coming. Caleb found Voss first. The trapper was outside his cabin, checking his own defenses. "Heard you got company," Voss said without looking up. "Yeah." "They after your woman?" "They're after a woman who happens to be under my protection." Difference matters. Voss straightened. "What do you want, Rourke?" "Help." "Why would I help you?" "Because if they're willing to come up here in winter to kill one person, they're desperate. Desperate people do stupid things, things that might affect everyone in this camp." Voss considered this. "You offering payment?" 2 deer, already dressed. Enough meat to get you through January. Make it 3. I don't have 3. Then I don't have help. Voss turned away. Caleb caught his arm. They'll come for you too eventually. You know that, right? Once they're done with me, they'll want to make sure there are no witnesses. Voss yanked his arm free. That's my problem to deal with. It's everyone's problem. Not mine, not yet. He went inside and shut the door. Caleb moved through the camp, trying 3 more men. Got variations of the same answer. Nobody wanted to risk their neck for someone else's trouble. He was heading back to the cabin, empty-handed and running out of options, when someone called out, "Rourke?" He turned. A younger man stood in the doorway of one of the smaller cabins. Caleb didn't know his name. The man had arrived late in the season, kept to himself. "You need help," the man said. Not a question. "Yeah, I'll help. No payment." Caleb studied him. "Why?" "Because I know what it's like to run from something, and I know what it's like when nobody helps." He stepped out into the snow. "Name's Peter Marsh. I can shoot, and I don't mind a fight. This might get you killed." "Might, but sitting around waiting to die isn't much better." Caleb extended his hand. Peter shook it. His grip was firm, his eyes steady. "Thank you," Caleb said. "Don't thank me yet." They walked back to the cabin together. When they entered, Mara had the rifle trained on the door. She lowered it when she saw Caleb, then noticed Peter. "Who's this?" "Reinforcements," Caleb said. "Peter Marsh, this is Mara Ellison." Peter nodded. "Ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. I'm not old enough for that yet." Mara set the rifle down. "How many others did you convince?" "Just him." Her face fell. "So it's 3 of us against however many of them." "Better than 2. "Not by much." Peter moved to the window, looked out. "They're still watching. I counted 6 positions on my way over. Could be more." "There are more," Mara said quietly. "Victor Haynes doesn't do anything halfway." "Who is he?" Peter asked. Mara glanced at Caleb. He nodded. She told Peter the short version, the fraud, the deaths, the evidence she'd stolen, the men sent to kill her. When she finished, Peter whistled low. "That's a hell of a thing to be carrying around." "The evidence is hidden," Mara said. "Not here. Somewhere safe." "Where?" "I'm not telling anyone. If they torture it out of me, fine, but I won't give them a reason to hurt anyone else." Peter looked at Caleb. "She's tougher than she looks." "Yeah. Took me a while to figure that out, too." They spent the day preparing. Peter helped them create fallback positions inside the cabin, places to take cover if the walls were breached. They rationed out the ammunition, gave Peter one of the spare rifles. "If they hit us tonight," Caleb said, "they'll try to burn us out. That's what I'd do. Fire draws people outside, makes them easier targets." "So we let it burn?" Mara asked. "No, we put it out fast and shoot anyone who gets close. And if we can't put it out, then we run, but we run together, and we run smart." Mara didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Night came fast and cold. They took shifts, 2 awake, 1 sleeping. Caleb and Mara took first watch. Peter stretched out near the stove, asleep within minutes. "He trusts easy," Mara whispered. "Or he's too tired to care," Caleb said. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind howled. Snow piled against the walls. "I'm sorry," Mara said suddenly. "For what?" "For bringing this to you, for ruining your winter, for—" "Stop. I mean it. You didn't ask for any of this." "No, but I got it anyway, and I'm still here." Caleb looked at her. "You're not the first person to bring trouble to my door, Mara. You're just the first one who's tried this hard to survive it." "What happened to the others?" "They died. Or they ran. Either way, they didn't last." "And you think I will?" "I think you're too stubborn to die easy." He smiled, just a little. "It's a good quality up here." Mara smiled back. It looked strange on her face now, like she'd forgotten how. The attack came at 2 a.m. No warning, no shouts. Just the sudden crash of glass as something came through the window, trailing fire. Caleb was moving before his brain caught up. He grabbed the burning object, a bottle filled with oil and rags, and hurled it back through the broken window. It exploded outside, lighting up 3 figures rushing the cabin. Contact, he shouted. Peter was up, rifle in hand. Mara grabbed the other rifle, her hand shaking but steady enough. Gunfire erupted. Bullets punched through the shutters, splintered wood. Caleb fired back, saw one of the figures drop. Peter took out another. Then the second bottle came through, this one hitting the floor near the stove. Fire spread fast, hungry for the dry wood. Mara, put it out, Caleb shouted, still firing. She dropped the rifle, grabbed the water bucket, threw it on the flames. They hissed but didn't die. She grabbed a blanket, started beating at the fire. More gunfire, more figures in the clearing. Caleb counted 8, maybe 9. Too many, Peter yelled. Fall back! Caleb grabbed Mara, pulled her toward the back corner they'd prepared. Peter followed, laying down covering fire. The front door exploded inward. 2 men rushed through, guns raised. Caleb shot the first one. Peter got the second, but more were coming. We can't hold them, Peter shouted. Caleb's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and the cabin was burning. In minutes, they'd be overrun. Then Mara grabbed his arm. The root cellar. What? Under the cabin. The root cellar. We go down, collapse the entrance behind us, come up outside the perimeter. It was insane. It might work. Go! Caleb shoved her toward the trap door hidden under the bed. Peter, cover us! Peter fired in controlled bursts while Caleb and Mara threw the bed aside, yanked open the trap door. Cold air rushed up from below. Peter, move! The younger man backed toward them, still firing. A bullet caught him in the shoulder. He spun, went down. Mara didn't hesitate. She grabbed Peter's other arm, helped Caleb drag him to the trap door. Down! Now! Caleb shoved them both through the opening, then followed, pulling the door shut above him. Darkness swallowed them. The cellar was cramped, freezing, barely tall enough to crouch in. Above them, footsteps thundered across the cabin floor. This way, Mara whispered, moving toward the far end. There's an exit on the north side. I found it when I was storing potatoes. They crawled through the dark, Peter groaning between them. Blood soaked through his coat. Behind them, they heard the trapdoor open. Move faster, Caleb hissed. They reached the far end. Mara found the second trapdoor, shoved it open. Snow and night air poured in. They emerged into the clearing behind the cabin, 50 yards from the main fight. The cabin was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the sky. Can you walk? Caleb asked Peter. Yeah, hurts like hell, but yeah. Oh, good. Because we need to run. They moved into the trees, leaving the burning cabin behind. Shouts followed them, but the darkness and snow gave them cover. They ran until their lungs burned, until the sounds of pursuit faded. Finally, Caleb called a halt in a small ravine where the trees grew thick. Peter collapsed against a trunk, breathing hard. His shoulder was bleeding steady but not arterial. Let me see, Mara said, kneeling beside him. She tore his coat open, examined the wound by moonlight. It went through. That's good. Doesn't feel good, Peter gasped. It will feel worse when I pack it. She looked at Caleb. We need cloth, something clean. Caleb pulled off his shirt despite the cold, tore it into strips. Mara packed the wound front and back, tied it tight. Peter bit down on a stick to keep from screaming. When she finished, she sat back, her hands covered in blood. That'll hold. For now. What now? Peter asked. Caleb looked back toward the settlement. The fire was a beacon in the darkness. Now we figure out how many of them are left, and then we kill them before they kill us. There's too many, Peter said. There were, but we took out at least 3, maybe more in the fire. That still leaves 6, maybe 7. Then we be smart about it. Caleb checked his rifle. We know this mountain, they don't. That's our advantage. Mara stood. I'm tired of running. Both men looked at her. I've been running for months, she continued, her voice hard. I'm done. If they want me, they can try to take me. But I'm going to make them bleed for it. Caleb saw it then. The transformation complete. The soft woman from the city was gone. What stood in front of him now was something forged in cold and fear and fury. All right, he said. Then we fight. They moved through the forest like ghosts. Caleb led, reading the terrain, finding paths that wouldn't leave tracks. Peter followed, one arm useless, but the other still able to hold a rifle. Mara brought up the rear, her knife drawn, her eyes scanning the darkness. They circled back toward the settlement, staying high on the ridge. From there, they could see the burning cabin and the figures moving around it. Caleb counted. 5 men. One of them was the tall one from earlier, the one who'd shouted demands. 5, he whispered. We can handle 5. How? Mara asked. We split them up. Make them think we're in different places. They divide their forces. We pick them off one by one. That's a terrible plan, Peter said. You have a better one? No. Then it's the plan we've got. They spent the next hour setting it up. Caleb positioned Peter on the eastern ridge with clear sight lines to the settlement. Gave him 3 bullets and strict orders. Only shoot if he had a clean kill. Then he and Mara moved west, circling wide. When they were in position, Caleb picked up a rock and threw it hard into the trees on the far side of the clearing. The sound carried. The 5 men turned, guns raised. There, one of them shouted. East side. 3 of them moved toward the sound. 2 stayed with the burning cabin. Caleb waited until the 3 were far enough from the others, then whistled, a short, sharp sound that mimicked a bird. Peter's rifle cracked. One of the 3 men dropped. The other 2 scattered, looking for cover. Peter fired again. Missed. But it was enough. The 2 men were focused on the eastern ridge now, their backs to Caleb and Mara. Go, Caleb whispered. They moved fast and quiet. Mara broke right, Caleb went left. He came up behind the first man while the guy was trying to find Peter's position. Caleb didn't hesitate. He drove his knife into the base of the man's skull. The body dropped without a sound. Across the clearing, Mara tackled the second man. They went down in a tangle of limbs. The man was bigger, stronger, but Mara was vicious. She got her knife into his throat before he could scream. 2 left at the cabin. Caleb whistled again, different pattern. Peter would know to hold fire. The tall man and his companion were looking around now, realizing something was wrong. Marcus, Devon, report. No answer. The tall man started backing toward the tree line. Fall back, it's a trap. Too late. Caleb stepped out of the shadows, rifle raised. Don't move. The tall man froze. His companion started to turn, and Peter's rifle spoke from the ridge. The man went down. Now it was just the tall one. Drop the gun, Caleb said. The man didn't move. You're making a mistake, Rourke. I've made plenty. This isn't one of them. Victor Haynes will send more. He'll keep sending them until the job is done. Let him send them. I'll keep killing them. You can't win this. Maybe not, but I can make it so expensive he gives up. The tall man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. He doesn't give up, ever. That woman is already dead. She just doesn't know it yet. Mara stepped out of the shadows behind him, her knife still bloody. I'm standing right here. You want to try making good on that threat? The man's smile faded. Drop the gun, Caleb repeated. This time, the man did. It hit the snow with a soft thump. Good. Now walk away. Tell Haynes his men failed. Tell him if he sends more, they'll die too. He won't stop. Neither will I. The tall man stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and started walking toward the valley. Caleb watched until he disappeared into the darkness. Peter came down from the ridge, moving slow. You let him go? Yeah. Why? Because dead men can't carry messages. Mara looked at the bodies scattered across the clearing. He'll bring reinforcements. I know. So what do we do? Caleb looked at the burning cabin. Everything he owned was gone. The winter supplies, the shelter, all of it reduced to ash and ember. But they were alive. We rebuild, he said. Stronger this time. And when they come back, we'll be ready. The 3 of them stood in the snow, watching the fire burn down to coals. Around them, the mountain was silent, waiting. The war had just begun. They spent what remained of the night in Peter's cabin. It was smaller than Caleb's had been, one room with a leaking roof and gaps in the walls that let the wind through. But it had 4 walls and a door that locked, which made it a palace compared to sleeping in the open. Peter collapsed on his bed the moment they got inside. Mara checked his wound again, rewrapped it with clean cloth she found in his supplies. It's getting infected, she said quietly to Caleb. How bad? Bad enough. He needs real medicine, a doctor. Nearest doctor is 3 days down the mountain. In this weather, in his condition, he wouldn't make it halfway. Mara's jaw tightened. Then we treat it ourselves. With what? We don't have... I'll figure something out. She stood, started searching through Peter's shelves. There has to be something. Alcohol, honey, anything that can fight infection. Caleb watched her move through the cabin with focused intensity. 2 months ago, she would have panicked. Now she was problem-solving, adapting. The mountain had hammered her into something harder. She found a bottle of whiskey, half empty. This'll work. Not well, but better than nothing. Peter groaned when she poured it over the wound. The smell of blood and alcohol filled the small space. Sorry, Mara said, her hands gentle despite the pain she was causing. I know it hurts. Just don't let me die from some stupid infection after surviving getting shot, Peter gasped. I won't. Caleb moved to the window, looked out at the darkness. Dawn was still hours away. The settlement was quiet now, the fire reduced to a glowing skeleton of timber. No movement in the trees, but that didn't mean they were safe. They'll regroup, he said. That tall bastard will go back down, get reinforcements, come back stronger. How long do we have? Mara asked, still working on Peter's shoulder. Week, maybe 2. Depends how fast they can move and how much Haynes is willing to pay. He'll pay whatever it takes. Mara's voice went flat. I've seen his books. He spends more on bribes in a month than most people see in a lifetime. Peter stirred. So we're just waiting here to die? No, Caleb said. We're preparing. For what? An army? If that's what comes. That's insane. Probably, but I don't see another option. Caleb turned from the window. We can run. Try to get down the mountain before they come back. But in this weather, with your shoulder, we wouldn't make it far. And even if we did, they'd just hunt us somewhere else. So we stay and fight, Mara said. We stay and fight. Peter laughed, bitter and pained. 3 people against an army. Great odds. I've survived worse odds. When? Caleb didn't answer. Some stories stayed buried. They tried to sleep in shifts, but none of them managed more than an hour. Too much adrenaline. Too much fear. By the time gray light started filtering through the gaps in the shutters, they were all exhausted and wired. Caleb went out first, checking the perimeter. The snow had covered most of the tracks from the night before, but he could still read the story. 5 bodies where they'd fallen. The tall man's footprints leading down toward the valley. No sign of anyone else. He went back inside. We're clear. For now. What's the plan? Mara asked. She'd made coffee from Peter's supplies, weak and bitter, but hot. They drank it gratefully. We need to fortify this place. Make it defendable. Then we need weapons, ammunition, supplies. Caleb looked at Peter. How much do you have? Not enough for a siege, maybe 30 rounds for the rifle. Some food, not much else. Then we scavenge. The other cabins. My place, what's left of it. Anything we can use. The men in the settlement won't like that, Peter said. The men in the settlement can go to hell. They didn't help us when we needed it. I'm not asking their permission now. They spent the morning scavenging. Caleb and Mara went through the ruins of his cabin first. Most of it was ash, but they found things in the wreckage. His spare rifle, damaged but functional. Ammunition that had survived in a metal box, some tools. Not much, but more than nothing. The other cabins were trickier. They had to move fast, grab what they could before anyone noticed. Nails, rope, a box of shotgun shells, another knife. By noon, they'd accumulated a small arsenal. Voss caught them coming out of an abandoned cabin on the edge of the settlement. Looting now, Rourke? Caleb turned, his rifle in hand. Surviving. There's a difference. You brought this on us? Those men last night, the fire, that's your fault. They came for her, not for you. And when they come back, you think they'll care about the difference? Voss spat in the snow. You should leave. Take your woman and your problems and get off this mountain. No? Then you're a fool. Maybe, but I'm a fool who's still alive. Voss's hand drifted toward the pistol at his belt. Caleb's rifle came up smooth and fast. Don't, Caleb said quietly. They stood like that for 5 seconds. 10. Then Voss backed down, his hand moving away from the gun. When they kill you, Voss said, I'm not burying you. I wouldn't expect you to. Voss walked away. Caleb watched him go, then turned to Mara. We need to move faster. Word's going to spread. They did. By mid-afternoon, they had everything they could carry back to Peter's cabin. They spent the rest of the day reinforcing it. Caleb showed Mara how to create firing positions, how to angle the furniture for cover, how to make the cabin into a killing box for anyone stupid enough to force entry. Peter watched from the bed, too weak to help, but sharp enough to offer suggestions. You're good at this? He said to Caleb. The fortification, the tactics. Where'd you learn it? The war. Which one? Does it matter? They're all the same. People trying to kill you, you trying to kill them first. You ever lose? Caleb hammered another nail into the shutter. I'm still here, aren't I? That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Night fell fast and cold. They ate a sparse dinner, dried meat and hard bread, and settled in for another watch rotation. This time, Caleb insisted Mara sleep first. You've been awake for almost 2 days, he said. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. Neither are you. I've gone longer. Sleep. She did, curled near the stove with a blanket pulled tight. Caleb watched her for a moment, saw how her face had changed. The softness burned away, leaving something angular and hard. She looked like she belonged to the mountain now. Peter was awake, staring at the ceiling. You care about her. It wasn't a question. She's under my protection, Caleb said. That's not what I asked. Caleb didn't answer. It's all right if you do, Peter continued. Makes sense. She's tough. Tougher than anyone expected. Yeah. But you're scared of it, caring about someone. I'm not scared. Bullshit. I've seen how you look at her when you think no one's watching. You're terrified she's going to die and it's going to break something in you that's already cracked. Caleb's hand stilled on the rifle. You talk too much. Probably. But I'm right. Doesn't matter if you are. Caring about people gets them killed. I learned that a long time ago. And not caring keeps you safe? Safer. Peter shifted on the bed, winced. That's a lonely way to live. Loneliness doesn't shoot back. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. They're coming back, Peter said eventually. You know that, right? And when they do, there's going to be a lot more of them. I know. We can't win. We can make it expensive. Is that enough? Caleb looked at Mara, sleeping by the stove. It has to be. 3 days passed. No sign of attackers. No movement from the valley. Just cold and wind and waiting. Peter's fever broke on the 4th day. Mara's makeshift treatment had worked, barely. The wound was still angry and red, but the infection had stopped spreading. You're lucky, she told him. Don't feel lucky. You're alive. That's lucky enough. On the 5th day, Caleb saw the first scout. Movement in the trees, quick and deliberate. He tracked it for 10 minutes before it disappeared. That night, he saw another, then 2 more. They're here, he told Mara and Peter, watching, counting us, learning the layout. How many? Mara asked. Can't tell yet, but more than last time. When do you think they'll move? Soon. They won't wait long. Every day they're up here is another day they're burning resources. Peter struggled to sit up. I can shoot. Not well, but I can pull a trigger. You can barely stand. Then prop me up somewhere useful and hand me a rifle. Caleb looked at Mara. She nodded. All right, Caleb said. But if things go bad, you don't play hero. You stay down and stay alive. Understood? Understood. The attack came on the 6th night. No warning this time either. Just the sudden explosion of gunfire from 3 directions at once. Bullets tore through the shutters. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Caleb returned fire through the east window, saw muzzle flashes in the tree line. Too many to count. North side! Mara shouted, firing her rifle. Peter was at the south window, his good arm braced against the wall, squeezing off shots with grim determination. They're everywhere, Peter yelled. Hold position. Caleb dropped 1 attacker, shifted aim, dropped another. But for every one that fell, 2 more appeared. Something hit the roof. Heavy. Rolling. Get down, Caleb shouted. They dropped as the roof exploded. Fire and shrapnel filled the air. The blast knocked Caleb sideways, ears ringing. He tasted blood. Through the smoke, he saw figures rushing the door. He fired. One went down. Two more took his place. The door burst open. Mara was there first, knife in hand. She caught the first man in the throat. He went down choking. The second man tackled her and they crashed into the table. Caleb shot him before he could hurt her. But more were coming. Fall back! Caleb grabbed Mara, hauled her up. Peter was already moving, stumbling toward the back corner. They retreated behind the overturned furniture they'd positioned for exactly this scenario. It gave them cover, created a bottleneck. 4 men rushed through the door. Caleb killed 2. Peter got 1. The 4th made it to cover. Then the windows exploded as more attackers came through. The cabin descended into chaos. Gunfire, screaming, the smell of powder and blood. Caleb fought with rifle, pistol, knife, whatever he could reach. Beside him, Mara was a whirlwind of violence, all the fear and rage of the last months concentrated into pure survival instinct. She shot a man point blank, stabbed another, didn't hesitate, didn't stop. Peter went down hard, his wounded shoulder hitting the floor. An attacker loomed over him, gun raised. Mara threw her knife. It caught the man in the eye. He dropped. But there were too many. Caleb felt a bullet graze his ribs. Then another hit his leg. He stumbled, kept fighting. They were being overwhelmed. "The root cellar!" Mara screamed. But there was no root cellar here, no escape route. They were going to die in this cabin. Then Caleb saw it. The oil lamp on the shelf, the one Peter used for light. He grabbed it, hurled it at the nearest cluster of attackers. It shattered, spreading fire. "Out!" Caleb shoved Mara toward the door. "Now!" They burst out into the snow, Peter between them, half dragged. Behind them, the cabin was engulfed in flames. Gunfire chased them into the darkness. Caleb ran, ignoring the pain in his leg. They crashed through the trees, branches tearing at their clothes. More gunfire. Someone screaming orders. They made it 50 yards before Peter collapsed. "Can't," he gasped. "Go on without me." "Shut up," Mara said, trying to lift him. "She's right," Caleb said. "We're not leaving you. You have to—" "We're not." Caleb looked around, desperate. They were in a small clearing at the base of a steep slope. Above them, the mountain rose sharp and unstable. Below, their pursuers were closing in. An idea formed. Terrible. Desperate. "How many are chasing us?" he asked. Mara looked back. 8, maybe 10. "Good. That's good." "How is that good?" Caleb pointed up the slope. "See that overhang? The snow's unstable. Has been since the last storm. One good shock and it'll come down." Understanding dawned on Mara's face. "You want to start an avalanche?" "Yeah." "That could kill us too." "Probably, but it'll definitely kill them." Peter laughed, blood on his teeth. "Do it." Caleb pulled out his pistol, aimed high at the overhang. "When I fire, run. Don't look back, just run." "Where?" "Away from the slope, fast as you can." Mara grabbed Peter's good arm. "Ready!" Caleb fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The sound echoed off the rocks. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mountain groaned. "Run!" They ran. Behind them, the overhang broke free. Thousands of tons of snow and ice and rock came sliding down, picking up speed, picking up mass, becoming a wall of white death. The pursuing men saw it too late. Caleb heard them screaming as the avalanche swallowed them whole. He ran harder, Mara and Peter ahead of him. The roar was deafening, the ground shaking. The avalanche spread, wider than he'd anticipated. It was going to catch them. "Faster!" he screamed, but he knew it was useless. The white wall hit. Caleb felt himself lifted, tumbled, buried. Cold crushed him from every direction. He couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't tell which way was up. Then everything stopped. Silence. Darkness. He was buried alive. Caleb tried to move. Couldn't. The snow had packed around him like concrete. His chest was compressed. Each breath was agony. He was going to die here, frozen and buried. Then he heard it, muffled, distant. Someone digging. "Caleb!" Mara's voice. He tried to respond but couldn't get enough air. The digging got closer, frantic. "Caleb, answer me!" He managed a groan, barely audible. "I hear you. Hold on!" More digging, faster now, then light, blinding and beautiful. Mara's face appeared, streaked with blood and dirt. She grabbed his coat, pulled. Other hands helped. Peter's. They dragged him out of the snow. He gasped, coughing, lungs burning. "You're alive," Mara sobbed. "You stupid, stupid bastard. You're alive." Caleb looked around. They were on the edge of the avalanche field. Behind them, the slope was scoured clean. 30 yards away, bodies jutted from the snow, not moving. "The others?" he rasped. "Dead," Peter said. He was pale, swaying. "All of them. The avalanche got them all." Caleb tried to stand. His leg gave out. Looking down, he saw blood spreading across his pants. The bullet wound from the cabin. Worse than he'd thought. "Can you walk?" Mara asked. "Not well." "Then we'll carry you." "You can't." "We can and we will." She got under one shoulder. Peter took the other, grimacing with pain. Together, they started moving. Away from the settlement, away from the death. They made it maybe 100 yards before Caleb's vision started tunneling. "I need to stop," he said. "We can't stop. You're bleeding too much." "I need to stop or I'm going to pass out, and you'll have to drag me." Mara lowered him against a tree. Blood was pooling in the snow beneath him now. "It's bad," Peter said quietly. "I know." Mara tore cloth from her shirt, pressed it against the wound. Caleb hissed. "You need to keep going," he said. "Get down the mountain. Find help." "We're not leaving you." "Mara, no." Her voice cracked. "You don't get to die. Not after everything. Not after saving us." "I'm not trying to die, but I'm not sure I get a choice." She pressed harder on the wound. "Then don't give up. Fight, like you taught me to fight." Caleb looked at her, blood on her face, tears freezing on her cheeks, hands shaking but steady on the wound. "I'm tired," he said. "I don't care. Stay awake. Stay with me." His vision was fading. "Mara, no, stay with me. Caleb, Caleb." Her voice followed him down into the darkness. When he woke, he was moving, being carried. He tried to focus, but everything was blurred. "He's awake," someone said. "Peter." "Caleb?" Mara's face swam into view. "Can you hear me?" "Yeah, we're almost there. We found one of the old hunting shelters. We can stop. Treat your wound properly." "How long was I out?" "An hour, maybe more." He'd lost too much blood. He could feel it, the weakness, the cold that had nothing to do with the snow. They reached the shelter. It was barely standing, half collapsed, but it had walls and a roof. Peter got a fire started while Mara laid Caleb down on the floor. "I need to dig out the bullet," she said. "It's still in there." "Do it." She heated her knife in the fire. Caleb bit down on a piece of leather as she cut into his leg. The pain was white hot, absolute. He heard himself screaming from a distance. Then the bullet was out, and Mara was packing the wound with cloth soaked in whiskey. "You're going to live," she said, but her voice shook with uncertainty. Caleb passed out again. He drifted in and out over the next hours. Days. He wasn't sure. Sometimes he was burning up, sometimes freezing. Sometimes he heard voices. Mara and Peter arguing about something. Sometimes he was alone in the dark. When he finally surfaced for real, the shelter was quiet. A fire burned low. Mara sat beside him, her head on her knees, asleep. "Mara," he rasped. She jerked awake. "Caleb, you're back. How long?" 3 days. Your fever broke this morning." 3 days. He should be dead." "Peter?" "He's outside, checking the perimeter. His shoulder's healing." She touched Caleb's face, checking for fever. "You scared me." "Sorry. Don't apologize, just don't do it again." He managed a weak smile. "I'll try." She helped him drink water. It was the best thing he'd ever tasted. "The men from the avalanche?" he asked. "Dead. All of them. I checked. And the tall one? The leader from before? Gone. Either buried or he ran. I couldn't find him." So maybe they were done. Maybe Haynes would give up. Or maybe this was just the beginning. "We can't stay here," Caleb said. "Too exposed." "I know, but you can't travel yet." "I'll manage." "Caleb, I'll manage. We need to move before anyone else comes looking." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then we move tomorrow, but tonight you rest." He didn't argue. He was too tired. That night, Mara stayed close, not touching, but near enough that he could hear her breathing. "Thank you," he said into the darkness. "For what?" "Not leaving me. I told you I wouldn't. People say a lot of things. I meant it." She was quiet for a moment. "You saved my life multiple times. It's my turn to save yours." "We're even then." "Not even close." Caleb turned his head to look at her. In the firelight, she looked exhausted but alive, still fighting. "When this is over," he said, "when we're safe, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead." "You should." "Why?" "Because you deserve more than just surviving." Mara smiled sadly. "So do you." But Caleb wasn't sure he did. He'd made too many mistakes, hurt too many people. Survival was probably more than he'd earned. Still, looking at Mara, seeing what she'd become, what they'd built together out of blood and snow and desperation, maybe there was something worth holding on to, if they lived long enough to claim it. They left the shelter at dawn. Caleb could walk, barely, leaning on a makeshift crutch Peter had carved from a branch. Every step was agony, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. Staying meant dying, and he'd already come too close to that. The descent was brutal. The trail was buried under snow, the footing treacherous. Twice Caleb's leg gave out and he went down hard. Each time, Mara and Peter got him back up without a word. They'd stopped asking if he was all right. They all knew the answer. The wind cut through their clothes like knives. Caleb's leg throbbed with each step, the makeshift bandages soaked through with blood that froze in the cold. He could feel his strength draining with every yard they covered, but stopping wasn't an option. Behind them, the mountain loomed like a silent witness to everything they'd survived. "We need to rest," Mara said after 2 hours of descent. "Just for a few minutes." "Can't. Need to keep moving while I still can." "Caleb, you're bleeding through the wrapping. If we don't stop and fix it, you won't make it another mile." He knew she was right. They found a cluster of rocks that broke the wind, and Mara unwrapped his leg. The wound looked worse than before, angry red, swollen, seeping. She used the last of their clean cloth to rewrap it, her hands efficient despite the cold. "This isn't going to hold long," she said quietly. "It just needs to hold long enough." Peter was scanning the landscape behind them. "We're being followed." Caleb's head snapped up. "You sure?" "Movement on the ridge. Could be animals. Could be something else." "How far?" "Mile. Maybe less." They moved faster after that, Caleb pushing through the pain. The descent continued, endless and punishing. His vision started to blur at the edges, and he knew he was running on borrowed time. By midday, they'd made it below the tree line. The air was thicker here, easier to breathe. Caleb's vision stopped swimming quite so badly, but the exhaustion was bone deep now. He wasn't sure how much farther he could go. "There," Peter pointed. "Smoke. Someone's got a fire going." They approached cautiously, hands on weapons. The cabin that materialized through the trees was small and run down, but smoke poured from its chimney. A man emerged as they got closer, old, weathered, with suspicious eyes. "Keep moving," he said, raising a rifle. "I don't want your trouble." "We don't have trouble," Mara said. "Just a man who needs help. He's been shot." "Not my problem." "I can pay." Mara pulled out the few coins they had left. "Please, just let us rest for a few hours. Get warm." The old man looked at the money, then at Caleb's pale face. "How'd he get shot?" "Defending me." "From who?" "Men who wanted me dead." The old man spat in the snow. "I knew you were trouble. Get off my land." Caleb felt his legs give out. He went down hard, couldn't get back up. Through dimming vision, he saw Mara drop to her knees beside him. "Please," she begged the old man. "He's dying. I'm begging you." Something in her voice must have reached him, because the old man lowered his rifle. "Get him inside. But if any more of your trouble shows up, I'm throwing all of you out. Understood?" "Understood." They dragged Caleb into the cabin. It was cramped and dirty, but it was warm. The old man helped them get Caleb onto a cot near the fire. "Name's Garrett," the old man said. "And I want you gone soon as he can walk." "Thank you," Mara said. "Thank you." She worked on Caleb's wound while Peter kept watch at the window. The old man, Garrett, watched with critical eyes. "You know what you're doing?" he asked. Enough to keep him alive, I hope. Wounds infected, needs real medicine. I know, but we don't have any. Garrett disappeared into a back room, returned with a bottle of clear liquid. This'll help. Burn like hell, but it'll fight the infection better than whiskey. Mara took it gratefully. When she poured it over Caleb's wound, he came back to consciousness, screaming. "Hold him down," Mara said through tears. I'm sorry, but I have to do this." It took both Peter and Garrett to keep Caleb still while she cleaned and dressed the wound properly. By the time she finished, Caleb had passed out again, and Mara was shaking. "You gonna make it?" Garrett asked. "I don't know. Best get some rest yourself. You look half dead too." Mara didn't sleep. She sat beside Caleb, monitoring his breathing, changing the dressing when blood seeped through. Peter took first watch, then Garrett took over, surprisingly capable for his age. That night, Caleb's fever spiked. He thrashed and muttered, reliving battles Mara didn't know about. She held him down, whispered things she hoped he could hear. "You don't get to leave me. Not now. Not after everything. Stay. Please stay." Garrett brought broth, helped her get some into Caleb. "Your man's a fighter. I can see it. He'll pull through or die trying." "That's what I'm afraid of, the dying part. Fear's natural, but it won't change what happens. Either he's strong enough or he ain't." By morning, the fever had broken slightly. Caleb woke clear-eyed for the first time in days. "Where are we?" he rasped. "Safe. For now." Mara helped him drink water. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot and dragged down a mountain." "That's because you did." He managed a weak smile. "How long was I out?" "Day and a half." "We need to keep moving." "You can't even sit up." "Don't care. We're not safe here." "The hell you aren't," Garrett said from across the room. "I've got good walls and better aim. Anyone comes looking for trouble, they'll find it." "You don't know who we're running from." "Don't care. You're under my roof now. That means you're under my protection." Garrett cleaned his rifle with practiced movements. "Besides, I'm bored. Could use some excitement." Over the next 3 days, Caleb slowly recovered. The infection receded, his strength returned in small increments. Mara barely left his side, and Peter kept constant watch on the perimeter. On the 4th morning, Peter burst through the door. "We've got company. 3 riders coming up from the valley." Garrett moved to the window. "They looking for you?" "Probably," Caleb said, struggling to sit up. "Then let's give them a warm welcome." The riders approached cautiously. Garrett stepped out onto his porch, rifle visible. "That's far enough," he called. "State your business." One of the riders moved forward. "We're looking for 2 people. A man and a woman. The woman's wanted for theft." "That's so. What'd she steal?" "Documents belonging to Victor Haynes, railroad man. There's a reward for her return." "How much?" $5,000. Garrett whistled. "That's a lot of money. What's the man wanted for?" "Interfering with the recovery of stolen property. Also worth a reward." Inside the cabin, Mara gripped her knife. "We should run." "Can't run," Caleb said. "Not fast enough, not far enough." "So what do we do?" "We trust Garrett." Outside, Garrett was still talking to the riders. "5,000's a good payday. You mind if I see that poster? Want to make sure I'm looking for the right people." One of the riders handed over a folded paper. Garrett studied it, then looked back at the cabin. For a long moment, Mara thought he was going to turn them in. Then Garrett handed back the paper. "Haven't seen them, but I'll keep an eye out. Where should I send word if they show up?" "Telegraph office in Ridgeway. Attention, Victor Haynes." "Will do." The riders lingered for another minute, then turned and rode back down the trail. Garrett waited until they were out of sight before coming back inside. "They're gone, but they'll be back with more men. You need to move, and you need to move soon." "Why didn't you turn us in?" Mara asked. $5,000. "Because I don't like rich bastards who think they can buy anything. And because I've known men like Haynes, they don't stop with money. They take until there's nothing left." Garrett pulled out a map. "There's a town 8 miles east, Ridgeway. It's got a doctor, a marshal's office, and enough people that you can disappear if you're smart. Get there, tell the marshal what's happening. He's a good man, he'll help." "How do you know?" Peter asked. "Because he's my son." They left that afternoon. Garrett gave them supplies, fresh horses, and directions. As they mounted up, the old man gripped Caleb's arm. "You take care of that woman. She's got steel in her spine. Don't see that often." I know. And you, he said to Mara. Don't let him die doing something stupid. He's got that look about him. I won't. The ride to Ridgeway took 4 days instead of the estimated 2. Caleb couldn't manage more than a few hours in the saddle before he needed to rest. His leg was healing, but slowly. Too slowly. They camped rough each night, taking turns on watch. No one followed them, but the paranoia never faded. Every shadow was a threat. Every sound was a potential attack. On the 3rd night, Mara finally broke down. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice cracking. I can't keep running. I can't keep watching you bleed. I can't… Hey. Caleb pulled her close despite the pain it caused. We're almost there. And then what? We tell the marshal? He arrests Haynes? You really think it's that simple? No, but it's a start. What if it doesn't work? What if we get there and he doesn't believe us? What if Haynes gets to him first? Then we keep fighting, like we have been. I'm tired of fighting. I know, but you're good at it. Better than you think. He tilted her chin up. Look at me. You've survived things that would have killed most people. You're not going to give up now. How do you know? Because I know you, and you don't quit. Ever. She leaned against him, exhausted. I want this to be over. It will be. Soon. But Caleb wasn't sure he believed it. They reached Ridgeway on a cold afternoon. The town was bigger than the settlement, with actual streets and buildings that looked permanent. People moved with purpose, going about their business without the constant edge of survival that marked the mountain dwellers. They found the marshal's office on the main street. A man in his 30s sat behind a desk, reviewing paperwork. He looked up as they entered, and Caleb saw Garrett's eyes in a younger face. Help you? The marshal asked. Your father sent us, Mara said. He said you might be able to help. The marshal's expression shifted. You're the ones he telegraphed about. The woman Haynes is after. Yes. Got a name? Mara Ellison. The marshal stood, moved to the door, locked it. We need to talk, privately. He led them to a back room, made sure the windows were covered. When he spoke again, his voice was low and urgent. Victor Haynes has half the lawmen in 3 territories looking for you. He's offering rewards, making threats, pulling every string he's got. Whatever you took from him, he wants it back badly. It's evidence, Mara said, of fraud, bribery, deaths caused by his negligence. I worked for him. I saw everything. And you can prove it? I have copies of documents, ledgers, correspondence, all of it hidden in a safe location. The marshal sat back. That's a hell of a thing to be carrying around. I know, but it's the truth, and people died because of what he did. They deserve justice. Justice is complicated when you're going up against someone with Haynes's money and power. So you won't help us? I didn't say that. The marshal pulled out a bottle, poured 3 glasses. But you need to understand what you're up against. Haynes can buy judges, buy juries, buy entire towns if he needs to. Taking him down legally is going to be nearly impossible. Nearly isn't never, Caleb said. No, it's not. The marshal drank. But it'll be dangerous. For all of you. We've survived dangerous before, Peter said. We'll survive it again. The marshal studied them. 3 people who looked like they'd been through hell and come out the other side scarred but standing. All right, he said finally. Here's what we do. I contact the federal authorities. They have jurisdiction over railroad fraud. I hand over your evidence. You give a deposition. They build a case. How long will that take? Mara asked. Months. Maybe longer, and you'll need to stay alive until the trial. Can you protect us? I can try, but my jurisdiction ends at the county line. Beyond that, he shrugged. You're on your own. They spent that night in a room above the marshal's office. It was cramped but secure, with a deputy stationed outside the door. Caleb's leg was agony after the ride. Mara rewrapped it, saw how little progress it had made in healing. You need a real doctor, she said. Tomorrow. Tonight I just need sleep. But sleep didn't come easy. They lay in the darkness, listening to the town settle around them, both waiting for something to go wrong. Caleb? Mara's voice was small in the dark. Yeah? If this doesn't work, if Haynes wins, Will you promise me something? Depends what it is. Promise you'll run. Get out. Don't die trying to save me. Can't promise that. Why not? Because I'd be lying, and I don't lie to you. She was quiet for a moment. You're an idiot. Yeah, but I'm your idiot. That doesn't make it better. I know. She rolled over, pressed against him despite the wounds and the exhaustion. I don't want you to die for me. Then don't give me a reason to. Morning brought the doctor, an older woman named Hayes, who examined Caleb's leg with professional detachment. This should have killed you, she said bluntly. The infection alone should have done it. Stubborn, Caleb said. Apparently. She cleaned the wound properly for the first time since he'd been shot, applied actual medicine, wrapped it in clean bandages. You'll keep the leg, but you'll always have a limp, and if you stress it too much before it's healed, you'll tear it open again and we start this process over. How long until it's healed? Weeks, maybe months. I don't have months. Then you'll lose the leg, your choice. She left them with instructions and medicine, but Caleb knew he wouldn't follow them. He couldn't afford to. Over the next week, the marshal worked on building the case. Mara gave hours of testimony, walking federal investigators through every document, every transaction, every death that could be traced to Haynes's greed. The investigators were skeptical at first. A clerk making accusations against one of the most powerful men in the territory? It sounded like fantasy. But as Mara produced evidence, documents she'd hidden before fleeing, copies she'd made and sent to lawyers, their skepticism turned to belief. This is enough, the lead investigator said on the 7th day. This is more than enough to bring charges. Miss Ellison, you've just brought down a criminal empire. But Mara didn't feel victorious. She felt exposed. When will you arrest him? She asked. We'll coordinate with federal marshals, probably within the week. And until then? Until then, you stay hidden. Haynes can't know what's coming. They moved to a safe house on the edge of town. 2 stories, barred windows, deputies stationed outside. It felt like a cage, but it was better than being dead. Peter had stayed with them through everything, his shoulder healing slowly. He and Caleb spent hours talking about what came next. You really going back to the mountain? Peter asked one evening. It's home. Is it? Or is it just where you've been hiding? Caleb didn't have an answer for that. I'm taking the marshal up on his offer, Peter continued. Deputy work. Figure it's time I did something useful with my life. You've been useful. I've been surviving. That's not the same thing. Peter looked toward where Mara was sleeping in the next room. You two going to make it official? What? Marriage. You going to marry her? Haven't thought about it. You should. She's good for you. Makes you less of a bastard. I'm still a bastard. Yeah, but a slightly better one. The arrest happened on a cold morning in late November. Federal marshals coordinated with local law enforcement across 3 territories, moving simultaneously to prevent Haynes from running. Caleb and Mara were waiting in the safe house when the news came. The marshal himself delivered it. We got him. He's in custody. Multiple counts of fraud, bribery, and criminal negligence resulting in death. Mara sat down hard. It's over? The arrest is done, but the trial's still coming, and that's where things get dangerous. He was right. 3 days later, the first assassination attempt came. A man with a rifle, positioned across the street. He got off 2 shots before the deputies returned fire. 1 bullet shattered the window where Mara had been standing moments before. They moved her that night to a new location. Then another. Then another. Haynes might be in custody, but his reach was long. This is insane, Mara said after the 3rd move. How long can we keep doing this? Until the trial, the marshal said. Once you testify and he's convicted, his power breaks. Until then, he'll keep trying. When's the trial? 2 weeks. We've expedited everything given the severity of the charges and the ongoing threats. 2 weeks felt like an eternity. They moved again, this time to a courthouse holding cell. It was the most secure location available. Thick walls, multiple guards, no windows. It felt like a tomb. Caleb's leg had improved enough that he could walk without the crutch, though it still hurt like hell. He spent hours pacing the small cell, working the stiffness out. You're making me nervous, Mara said. Good. Nervous keeps you sharp. I'm plenty sharp. I just want this over. Soon. But soon felt like a lie when every day brought new threats. Letters arrived describing what Haynes's men would do to Mara if they got their hands on her. Anonymous tips claimed she was a fraud, a liar, a thief. The pressure was constant. On the 5th day of their confinement, Peter visited with news. Haynes's lawyers are good, really good. They're building a defense that paints him as the victim, says you stole documents, fabricated evidence, that this is all a scheme to extort money from him. That's insane, Mara said. Doesn't matter if it's insane if the jury believes it. Will they? I don't know, but you need to be ready for them to tear you apart on the stand. They're going to make you look like a criminal. Mara's hands shook. I can't do this. Yes, you can, Caleb said firmly. You've done harder things. Have I? Because right now, I can't remember anything harder than standing in a courtroom and having lawyers call me a liar while Haynes sits there smiling. Then you stand there and you tell the truth. And you don't break, no matter what they say. And if the jury doesn't believe me, then we deal with it. But you don't give up before you even try. The night before the trial, Mara couldn't sleep. She sat in the cell, staring at the wall, running through her testimony in her head. Caleb sat beside her. His leg throbbed, his shoulder ached, but he didn't move. I'm scared, she said quietly. I know. What if I mess this up? What if I forget something important? What if... Stop. You're going to do fine. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, because you've never quit on anything in your life. You're not going to start now. She leaned against him. Stay with me tomorrow, in the courtroom. I need to know you're there. I'll be there, front row, promise. The trial began on a gray Monday morning. The courthouse was packed. Journalists, curious citizens, lawyers in expensive suits. Haynes sat at the defense table looking calm and confident, like this was all a minor inconvenience. Mara took the stand wearing a simple dress the marshal's wife had provided. She looked small and fragile, which Caleb knew was an illusion. She was steel-wrapped in silk. The prosecution went first, walking her through her employment with Haynes, the documents she'd discovered, the pattern of fraud and negligence. And what did you do when you discovered this evidence? The prosecutor asked. I made copies. I didn't know who to trust, so I sent them to multiple law offices and the U.S. Marshal's office. Why not go directly to the authorities? Because Mr. Haynes had connections everywhere. I was afraid that if I went to the wrong person, I'd disappear. Did you steal these documents? I made copies of documents I had legal access to as part of my job. Then I left. And why did you leave? Mara's voice steadied. Because Mr. Haynes discovered what I'd done. He sent men to kill me. I ran to save my life. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge called for order. Then it was the defense's turn. Haynes's lead lawyer was a sharp-eyed man named Pemberton, who looked at Mara like she was something stuck to his shoe. Miss Ellison, isn't it true that you were fired from your position for incompetence? No. Isn't it true that you stole these documents out of revenge? No. Isn't it true that you fabricated evidence to extort money from my client? No. Then why should this jury believe anything you say? Mara looked at the jury. Because people died, real people with families. And Mr. Haynes covered it up to protect his profits. I have the documents to prove it. You can call me a liar all you want, but the evidence speaks for itself. Pemberton changed tactics. Let's talk about your journey to the mountain. You claim you were fleeing for your life, yet you had time to arrange passage, secure false documents, and establish a new identity. That doesn't sound like someone in fear for their life. I was terrified, but I was also smart enough to plan, or smart enough to create an elaborate fraud. No. And these men you claim were sent to kill you, can you prove they were working for Mr. Haynes? One of them survived long enough to tell the marshal who sent them. Hearsay. Not admissible. The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained it. The testimony continued for hours, Pemberton attacking every detail, every timeline, every decision Mara had made. By the end of the day, she looked exhausted, but she hadn't broken. That night, back in the holding cell, she collapsed. I can't do this again tomorrow, she said. He made me sound like a criminal. He made you sound human, Caleb corrected. You held your ground. That's what matters. The jury looked skeptical. The jury's still listening. That's all you need. The second day brought Caleb to the stand. The prosecution asked about the attack on the mountain, the men who'd come for Mara, the siege, and the avalanche. "How many men did you kill, Mr. Rourke?" the prosecutor asked. "I don't know. I wasn't counting." "More than 5? "Yes." "More than 10? "Probably." "And you felt justified in taking these lives?" "They were trying to kill us. I did what I had to do to survive." Pemberton's cross-examination was brutal. "Mr. Rourke, you're a known criminal, aren't you?" "No." "You've killed men before this incident?" "I was a soldier. I fought in the war." "And after the war? How many men have you killed?" "None that weren't trying to kill me first." "That's convenient. A dead man can't contradict your story." The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained it. "Let me ask you this," Pemberton continued. "Isn't it possible that you and Miss Ellison concocted this entire story? That you killed those men in a dispute over something else entirely, and now you're using my client as a scapegoat?" "No." "How can the jury believe you? You admit you're a killer." "I'm a survivor. There's a difference." The testimony continued. Peter testified about the attacks, about the men he'd seen, about the conversations he'd overheard. The federal investigators testified about the documents, the pattern of fraud, the deaths that could be traced directly to Haynes's cost-cutting measures. The evidence piled up, damning and detailed. But Haynes's lawyers were good. They created doubt at every turn, suggested alternative explanations, painted Mara and Caleb as criminals themselves. The trial stretched into its second week. The prosecution brought more witnesses, families of workers who'd died, engineers who'd warned about safety issues, officials who'd been bribed. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Victor Haynes took the stand. He was calm, collected, the picture of a successful businessman wrongly accused. He denied everything, said the documents were fabricated, said Mara had been a disgruntled employee, said he'd never ordered anyone killed. "Why would I need to?" he asked, looking directly at the jury. "I'm a legitimate businessman. I have no reason to silence anyone." It was a good performance. Too good. The prosecution tore into him on cross-examination, but Haynes never wavered, never showed a crack. When he stepped down, Caleb wasn't sure which way the jury was leaning. The closing arguments came on a Friday. The prosecution summarized the mountain of evidence, the clear pattern of criminal behavior, the deaths that resulted from Haynes's greed. "This man," the prosecutor said, pointing at Haynes, "valued profit over human life. He lied, he cheated, and when someone threatened to expose him, he tried to have them killed. The evidence is overwhelming. The only question is whether you have the courage to hold a powerful man accountable." Pemberton's closing was equally strong. He painted Mara as a con artist, Caleb as a violent criminal, and the whole case as the elaborate scheme to destroy an innocent man. "They want you to convict my client based on the testimony of liars and killers," he said. "But where's the proof? Real proof? Documents can be forged. Witnesses can be coached. Don't let emotion override reason." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Caleb and Mara waited in the holding cell, not speaking, just existing in the awful silence of uncertainty. When the bailiff came to get them, Mara's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't stand. Caleb helped her up. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "we face it together." "Together," she repeated. The courtroom was silent as the jury filed in. The forewoman stood, holding the verdict. "On the charge of fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." Mara's knees buckled. Caleb caught her. "On the charge of criminal bribery, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of criminal negligence resulting in death, how do you find?" "Guilty." The courtroom exploded. Haynes's face went white, then red. He started screaming about corruption, about injustice, about buying the judge and the jury and everyone who'd betrayed him. It took 4 bailiffs to restrain him as he was dragged from the courtroom, still screaming threats and curses. The judge sentenced him immediately. 20 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. When it was over, when the courtroom had emptied, Mara finally broke down. She sobbed into Caleb's shoulder, months of fear and rage and exhaustion pouring out all at once. He held her, saying nothing, just being there. "It's over," she gasped between sobs. "It's really over. Yeah, it's over. We won. You won. You did this." She pulled back, looked at him with red eyes. No, we did this. All of us. Peter appeared, looking relieved. Congratulations. You just took down one of the most powerful men in 3 territories. Feels weird, Mara said. I thought I'd feel happy, but I just feel tired. That's normal, Peter said. You've been running on adrenaline for months. Now that it's over, the crash hits. The marshal joined them. Miss Ellison, the federal authorities want to speak with you about additional charges against Haynes's associates, and several newspapers want interviews. I don't want to give interviews. Understood, but you should know you're a hero. What you did, standing up to someone like Haynes, that takes real courage. Mara shook her head. I'm not a hero, I'm just someone who got tired of running. They spent that night in a hotel room the marshal had arranged. Real beds, hot water, food that wasn't dried meat or hard bread. Caleb soaked his leg in hot water trying to ease the constant ache. Mara sat by the window staring out at the city. What are you thinking? He asked. About what comes next. We can go anywhere now, do anything, and I have no idea what I want. You want to go back to the city? Get a normal job? No, the city feels wrong now. Too many people, too much noise. Then where? She turned to look at him. What if we went back? To the mountain. You hated that mountain. I hated being weak on that mountain. I hated not knowing if I'd survive, but now… She moved closer. Now I know I can survive it, and maybe that's where I belong, where we belong. You're sure? No, but I'm not sure about anything anymore. Except you. I'm sure about you. Caleb pulled her down beside him. Then we go back. Together. Together. They left the city 3 days later, after Mara had given final statements to the authorities and declined the last interview requests. Peter saw them off, resplendent in his new deputy's uniform. You two take care of each other, he said. We will, Mara promised, and you stay out of trouble. No promises on that one. They rode west, toward the mountains that had tried to kill them both. The journey was slower this time. Caleb's leg couldn't handle long days in the saddle, and neither of them was in a hurry. They talked about everything and nothing, about the trial, about the future, about the life they might build together. They argued about small things and agreed on big ones. 5 days into the journey, Caleb pulled a small object from his saddlebag. I made this, he said, handing it to Mara, before all the trouble started. Been carrying it around since. It was a ring, crude, carved from mountain gold, but beautiful in its simplicity. Is this… Mara stared at it. A proposal. Yeah. Figured it was time to make it official. He took her hand. Marry me, Mara. Be my wife. Build a life with me on that mountain that tried to kill us both. She slipped the ring on. It fit perfectly. Yes, she said. Yes. They were married in Ridgeway, in a small ceremony with Doc Hayes officiating and Peter standing as witness. Mara wore a simple dress. Caleb wore his least dirty shirt. It wasn't fancy or formal. It was perfect. That night, in the room above the doctor's office, they lay together as husband and wife. We actually did it, Mara said. We survived everything and made it here. We did. I love you, Caleb Rourke, even though you're stubborn and difficult and you nearly died about 17 times. I love you too, Mara Rourke, even though you're just as stubborn and you brought an entire criminal empire down on our heads. She laughed, actually laughed. We're quite a pair. Yeah, we are. They stayed in Ridgeway for another week while Caleb's leg finished healing. Then they bought supplies and headed for the mountain. Home. Whatever waited for them there, they'd face it together. And that was enough. The mountain looked different in spring. The snow was melting in patches, revealing the bones of the earth underneath. Water ran in streams down the slopes, and the first green shoots pushed through the thawing ground. It was still harsh, still unforgiving, but there was life in it now. Promise. Caleb and Mara rode into the settlement on a clear April morning. The place had changed in their absence. Some cabins had been abandoned, their occupants driven off by the brutal winter. Others had been rebuilt, stronger than before. New faces mixed with old. Voss was the first to spot them. He emerged from his cabin, rifle in hand, then lowered it when he recognized them. Well, hell, he said. You two actually survived. Told you we would, Caleb said, dismounting carefully. His leg was better, but still stiff, especially after long days in the saddle. Voss looked them over. The scars, the hard edges, the way they moved like people who'd been through a war. Heard you took down Victor Haynes. That true? True, Mara said. He's in federal prison. 20 years. A slow smile spread across Voss's weathered face. Damn. Didn't think you had it in you. Either of you. He extended his hand to Mara. I was wrong about you. You're tougher than you look. I get that a lot. You planning to stay? If the mountain will have us. Voss nodded toward the ruins of Caleb's old cabin. That's still a mess. But there's Davy's place up on the North Ridge. Empty since he died. It's yours if you want it. We'll take it. Word spread fast through the settlement. By evening, half the remaining residents had found excuses to pass by Davies's cabin, curious about the couple who'd left as fugitives and returned as legends. Some of the reactions were friendly. Others were wary. A few were outright hostile. People who'd lost money betting on their deaths, or who resented the attention they'd brought to the mountain. Ignore them, Caleb said as they unloaded their supplies. They'll get over it or they won't. And if they don't, then they can leave. We were here first. The cabin needed work. The roof leaked in 2 places. The stove was cracked. The floor had gaps that let cold air through, but it was solid at its core, and it was theirs. They spent the first week making it livable. Caleb repaired the roof while Mara patched the stove. Together they fixed the floor, replaced broken shutters, and made the place weatherproof. It was hard work, but good work. The kind that left them tired and satisfied at the end of each day. On the 8th night, they sat by the fire eating dinner, venison stew Mara had made with vegetables from Voss's store. This feels right, she said. Being here, building this. Yeah, it does. Do you think we'll ever stop looking over our shoulders, waiting for something to go wrong? Probably not, but maybe that's okay. Keeps us sharp. Mara smiled, always the optimist. I prefer realistic. You prefer stubborn. That too. They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Caleb hunted and trapped, his knowledge of the mountain's patterns making him efficient. Mara started helping the other residents with medical issues, treating injuries, illness, delivering babies. Her time with Doc Hayes had taught her well. People started coming to her regularly, at first with small things, a cut that needed stitching, a fever that wouldn't break, then with bigger problems, a difficult birth that she managed to save both mother and child. A broken leg she set so well the man barely limped afterward. You're good at this, Caleb observed one evening after she'd spent 6 hours delivering a breech baby. I like it. Helping people, making things better. She washed blood from her hands. It feels like the opposite of everything that happened with Haynes, like I'm building instead of destroying. You didn't destroy anything. You exposed the truth. I destroyed his empire, his life. He destroyed his own life. You just held up a mirror. Mara was quiet for a moment. Do you think he's suffering in prison? Probably. Good. The word came out harder than she'd intended. Caleb looked at her. You allowed to hate him, you know, he said, after what he did to you. I know, but hate takes energy, and I'm tired of giving him any part of me. Then don't. Let him rot in his cell while you build something here. She nodded slowly. Yeah, that sounds better. Summer came fast and hot. The snow retreated to the highest peaks, and the mountain transformed into something almost beautiful. Wildflowers covered the meadows. Game was plentiful. For a few short months, living on the mountain wasn't a constant battle against death. Caleb built a larger workshop, started taking on projects for other settlers. Repairs, construction, metalwork, anything that needed doing. Word spread, and soon people from neighboring settlements were making the journey to hire him. You're getting a reputation, Mara said one evening. For what? Being the best builder in the highlands. And fair. People say you don't cheat on prices. Why would I cheat them? We all barely survive up here as it is. Most people don't think that way. They see an opportunity to make extra money. They take it. Most people are idiots. Mara laughed. True. By midsummer, they'd expanded the cabin, added a second room for Mara's medical supplies, and a covered porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. It wasn't luxurious, but it was comfortable. It was home. One evening, Voss came by with news. Federal marshals are coming through next week. Routine patrol, but they're asking about you two. Caleb tensed. Why? Haynes filed an appeal, claims the trial was rigged, evidence was fabricated, all that. Marshals want to make sure you're still alive and willing to testify if needed. Mara's face went pale. He's trying to overturn the conviction? Trying doesn't mean he'll succeed. Voss pulled out a letter, handed it to her. This came for you too, from the prosecutor. Mara opened it with shaking hands. She read quickly, then sat down hard. What does it say? Caleb asked. The appeal is being heard in 3 months. They need me to come back to Ashford. Testify again if necessary. She looked up, eyes wide. This isn't over. It's never going to be over. Hey, Caleb knelt beside her. It'll be fine. The evidence is solid. The conviction will hold. You don't know that. No, but I know you're not going through it alone. We'll face it together, same as everything else. The federal marshals arrived a week later, 2 men, professional and courteous. They interviewed Mara for 3 hours, verifying her story, checking details. When they left, they seemed satisfied. Your testimony was compelling the first time, one of them said. I doubt the appeal will go anywhere, but be prepared for a fight. Haynes has hired new lawyers, expensive ones. After they left, Mara was quiet for days. The shadow of Haynes had returned, hanging over everything. Talk to me, Caleb said finally. I thought we were done. I thought we'd won and it was over and we could just live. She looked at him, exhausted. But he's still there, still controlling our lives, even from a prison cell. Only if you let him. How do I not let him? He's forcing me back into that courtroom, making me relive everything again. Then we go back, you testify, you tell the truth like you did before, and then we come home. And if he wins, if the conviction gets overturned, then we deal with it, but that's not going to happen. Mara wanted to believe him, but doubt was a poison that spread easily. The months until the appeal hearing crawled by. Mara threw herself into work, treating patients, learning everything Doc Hayes could teach her during his monthly visits. Caleb built things, worked until his hands bled, trying to keep his mind occupied. They didn't talk much about what was coming. It felt like acknowledging it would make it more real. August brought Peter for a visit. He'd been promoted, wore his badge with pride, and looked more settled than Caleb had ever seen him. How's married life? Peter asked over dinner. Good, Caleb said. Hard sometimes, but good. You two look happy. Well, as happy as people who've been through hell can look. We're working on it, Mara said. Some days are better than others. Peter's expression turned serious. I heard about the appeal. How are you holding up? I'm terrified, Mara admitted. The thought of going back there, facing Haynes's lawyers again, having them call me a liar, I can barely sleep. You were incredible in that courtroom. You'll be incredible again. What if I'm not? What if I freeze or forget something important? You won't. And even if you do, the evidence speaks for itself. Haynes is guilty. The jury saw that. The appeals court will see it too. You sound confident. I am. I've seen how this works. Appeals almost never overturn convictions when the evidence is this strong. Almost never isn't never. No, but it's close enough. Peter stayed for 3 days. His presence helped. A reminder that they had friends, that they weren't facing this alone. When he left, he made them promise to send word after the hearing. Whatever happens, he said, you'll get through it. You always do. September arrived cold and gray. They left for Ashford on the 1st, giving themselves plenty of time to make the journey. Caleb's leg was better now, healed enough that he barely limped, but the long ride still made it ache. They rode in silence mostly, both lost in their own thoughts. The landscape changed as they descended, from harsh mountain peaks to rolling hills to the flatlands where civilization thrived. Ashford looked the same as when they'd left it. Same buildings, same streets, same noise. But Caleb and Mara were different. They'd been harder then, sharper. Now they'd softened slightly around the edges, let themselves hope for peace. Walking back into the courthouse felt like stepping into a nightmare. The courtroom was packed again. More journalists this time, drawn by the story of the appeal. Haynes sat at the defense table looking thinner but still defiant. When he saw Mara, he smiled. It was a cruel smile, full of confidence. The hearing began with Haynes's new lawyer, a sharp woman named Aldrich, who made Pemberton look amateurish. She systematically attacked every piece of evidence, every witness, every aspect of the original trial. The documents were fabricated, she argued. Miss Ellison had access to the company letterhead, the accounting formats, everything needed to create convincing forgeries. And her motivation was clear: revenge against an employer who'd rightfully terminated her. "That's a lie," Mara whispered. "I know," Caleb said, "but let them talk. Your turn will come." Aldrich continued, painting a picture of an elaborate fraud. The deaths that supposedly resulted from Mr. Haynes's negligence, those were accidents. Tragic, but accidents nonetheless. Blaming my client for every workplace incident is absurd. The prosecution countered with the same evidence as before: documents, testimony, proof of systematic fraud. But Aldrich had answers for everything, alternative explanations that created doubt. Mara testified on the third day. She was more prepared this time, more confident. She'd been through this before and survived. She could do it again. But Aldrich was better than Pemberton, more subtle, more patient. She didn't attack Mara directly. Instead, she picked apart her timeline, found small inconsistencies, magnified them. "Miss Ellison, you claim you fled the city on October 15th, but records show you withdrew money from your bank on October 17th. How is that possible?" I must have gotten the dates confused. "Or you're lying." "I'm not lying. It's been almost 2 years. Some details blur. But you expect this court to trust your memory about documents you claim to have seen, about conversations you claim to have overheard, when you can't even remember when you left the city?" It went on like that for hours. Death by 1,000 cuts. When Mara finally stepped down, she looked destroyed. That night, in their hotel room, she broke. "I made us look like fools," she said, pacing. "I couldn't remember dates. I got confused about timelines. Aldrich made me look incompetent." "You looked human. That's not the same as incompetent." The judges didn't look convinced. They're judges. They're not supposed to look convinced until they make a decision. "I can't lose this, Caleb. If they overturn the conviction, if Haynes goes free, he won't. You don't know that." "No, but I believe it, and you need to believe it too." Mara collapsed on the bed. "I'm so tired. I'm tired of fighting, tired of being scared. I just want it to be over." Caleb lay beside her, pulled her close. "It will be. Soon." The appeals court deliberated for 2 days. 2 days of waiting, of second-guessing every word Mara had said, of imagining the worst. When the decision finally came, they were both exhausted from fear. The lead judge read the decision in a flat, emotionless voice. "Having reviewed the evidence and testimony, this court finds no grounds to overturn the conviction. The original trial was conducted fairly, the evidence was overwhelming, and the verdict was just. The appeal is denied. Victor Haynes will serve his full sentence." Mara didn't cry this time, didn't collapse. She just sat there, letting the words wash over her. It was over, really over. Haynes's reaction was different than before. He didn't scream or fight. He just sat there, defeated, as they led him back to custody. Outside the courthouse, Mara finally allowed herself to feel it. "We won," she said quietly. "Again." "You won," Caleb corrected. "You faced him twice and won both times." "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yeah, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." They stayed in Ashford for another week, tying up loose ends. Mara gave a statement to the newspapers, brief, factual, refusing to be dramatic. She wasn't interested in being a hero. She just wanted to go home. The return journey was lighter somehow. The weight they'd been carrying for months was finally gone. "What do you want to do when we get back?" Mara asked. "Build that extension we talked about. Expand the clinic space." "You hate building." "I hate a lot of things. Doesn't mean I won't do them." He looked at her. "What do you want?" "I want to help people. Heal them. Make the mountain a little less deadly." "That's a good goal. Is it enough?" "It's more than most people do." They reached the mountain in mid-October, exactly 2 years after Mara had first arrived. The settlement was preparing for winter, and there was a familiar urgency to the work. But this time, Mara wasn't struggling to keep up. She knew what needed doing and how to do it. She moved through the preparations with confidence, helping others while managing her own stockpiles. Caleb watched her, saw how much she'd changed. The soft city woman was completely gone, replaced by someone harder, stronger, more capable, but not cruel. She'd been through hell without letting it make her heartless. "You're staring," she said without looking up from the firewood she was stacking. "Just admiring my wife." "Your wife is sweaty and covered in wood chips." "Still beautiful." She threw a wood chip at him. He caught it, grinning. Winter came hard that year. Brutal cold, deep snow, weeks where leaving the cabin was dangerous. But Caleb and Mara were prepared. They had food, fuel, and each other. They spent the long nights talking, reading, planning for spring. Mara studied medical texts Doc Hayes had given her. Caleb sketched designs for buildings he wanted to construct. They played cards, badly, and argued about everything from the best way to season venison to whether the north wall needed more insulation. It was domestic and ordinary and perfect. One night in January, during a particularly bad storm, Mara asked a question she'd been avoiding. "Do you think about having children?" Caleb looked up from the knife he was sharpening. "Sometimes." "You?" "Yeah, but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of bringing a child into this. The mountain, the danger, the isolation." She paused. "And of being a bad mother. I don't exactly have a normal life to offer." "Normal's overrated. You'd be a good mother. Patient, strong, smart." "You'd be a good father." "I'm not sure about that, but I'd try." "Is that enough? Trying?" "It's all anyone can do." They didn't make a decision that night, but they'd started the conversation, and that felt important. Spring arrived with the usual drama: flooding, mudslides, avalanches in the high peaks. The settlement lost 2 cabins to a slide, but everyone survived. Mara treated injuries, helped people rebuild, became more integrated into the community than ever. By summer, she wasn't just accepted, she was valued. When someone got sick or hurt, they came to Mara. When something needed building or fixing, they went to Caleb. The couple who'd arrived as strangers had become pillars of the settlement. "We've got a good life here," Mara said one evening, sitting on their porch watching the sunset. "Yeah, we do. Do you ever miss it, the city, civilization?" "Not even a little." "You?" "Sometimes I miss convenience, hot baths, books, but not enough to leave." "Good, because I'd miss you if you left." "Just miss me?" "Fine. I'd be devastated and probably drink myself to death within a month." "Better." New settlers arrived that summer, drawn by stories of opportunity in the highlands. Among them was a young couple with a baby, the Harrisons. They looked overwhelmed and underprepared. Mara saw herself in them immediately. "Let me help," she offered. "The mountain's hard when you don't know what you're doing." She spent weeks teaching Mrs. Harrison everything she'd learned: how to preserve food, treat altitude sickness, manage the cold. The woman was grateful, and a friendship formed. "You're good at this," Mrs. Harrison said one day. "Teaching, I mean. You should do more of it." "More of what?" "Help new arrivals, create some kind of, introduction to mountain life. Half the people who come up here die in the first winter because they don't know what they're doing." The idea took root. Mara talked to Caleb about it that night. What if we started something? A way to help new settlers survive their first year. Like what? Classes, maybe. Teach them what they need to know: hunting, trapping, food preservation, basic medicine. That's a lot of work. I know. But think about how many people we could save. How many families wouldn't have to go through what we went through? Caleb considered it. You'd need a bigger space, somewhere people could gather. Could you build it? Probably, if we got help from others. They proposed the idea to the settlement. The response was mixed. Some people thought it was unnecessary, others saw the value. But enough people supported it that they moved forward. Over the next year, they built a community center. Small, rough, but functional. It had space for gatherings, storage for supplies, and a clinic area where Mara could treat patients. The first winter survival class had 8 attendees. Mara taught them everything she knew, with Caleb demonstrating practical skills. By spring, all 8 were still alive, an impressive success rate for new mountain dwellers. Word spread. The next year, they had 15 students, then 25. The community center became a hub, a place where people gathered not just to learn, but to connect. 3 years after returning from the appeal, Caleb and Mara had built something neither of them had expected: a community. Not just a collection of isolated survivors, but people who looked out for each other, helped each other, survived together. "We did this," Mara said one evening, looking at the center full of people. "We did. Are you happy?" Caleb thought about it. Happiness was a complicated thing for people who'd been through what they'd been through. But looking at the life they'd built, the people they'd helped, the woman beside him. "Yeah," he said. "I'm happy." Years passed. The community center expanded. More settlers arrived. The mountain settlement transformed from a collection of desperate survivors into something resembling a real town. Mara became the unofficial doctor for the entire region. People traveled from neighboring settlements to see her, trusting her skill and experience. She learned constantly, corresponded with Doc Hayes, studied every medical text she could get her hands on. Caleb's reputation as a builder spread even wider. He designed better cabins, more efficient stoves, stronger structures that could withstand the mountain's violence. Other settlements started hiring him, and he traveled sometimes, though never for long. He always came home to Mara. They never had children. It just didn't happen, despite years of trying. For a while that hurt, but eventually they made peace with it. They had something else, a community they'd helped build, people they'd taught and helped and protected. That was enough. On the 10th anniversary of Mara's arrival, the settlement threw a celebration. It was partly for them, partly just an excuse to break the monotony of mountain life. People gathered in the community center, brought food and drink, told stories. Voss, older now and slower, raised a glass. To Caleb and Mara, the two stubborn bastards who refused to die and made the rest of us better for it. People cheered. Later, Caleb and Mara slipped away from the crowd, walked to the ridge overlooking the valley. The same ridge where Caleb had watched Mara arrive 10 years ago. "You remember what I thought when I first saw you?" he asked. "That I'd be dead within days." "Yeah." "You weren't wrong to think that. I almost was." "But you didn't die. You survived. And then you helped everyone else survive." He took her hand. "I'm proud of you, of what you've become. I'm proud of us, of what we built together." They stood in silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. The same mountains that had tried to kill them. The same mountains they'd chosen as home. "Do you ever think about Haynes?" Mara asked. "Wonder if he's still alive?" "Sometimes, but not often. He's not worth the mental energy. He lost everything, his empire, his freedom, his reputation." "Good. Do you think he knows? That we're still here, still living, still happy? Do you think that haunts him?" "I hope so." Mara smiled. "Me too." They walked back to the celebration hand in hand, ready to rejoin the community they'd built. Behind them, the mountains stood silent and eternal, having tested them both and found them worthy. Years turned into decades. They grew older together, their bodies marked by scars and hard work, but their spirits intact. The settlement continued to grow, evolved into a proper town with a name, Rourke's Ridge, though Caleb hated that and argued unsuccessfully against it. New generations arrived, children who'd been born on the mountain and knew no other life. Mara taught some of them medicine. Caleb taught others building and hunting. They became elders, respected voices in the community. Peter visited when he could, eventually bringing a wife of his own. The three of them would sit around the fire, reminiscing about old times, laughing at how young and stupid they'd been. "You almost died about 17 times, Peter said during one visit. 18, Caleb corrected. "You're forgetting the time with the bear." "Oh, right, the bear." Peter shook his head. "How are you still alive?" "Stubbornness," Mara said. "Pure stubbornness and spite. That'll do it." They were in their 50s when word came that Victor Haynes had died in prison. Heart attack, quick and relatively painless. Mara felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, no anger. Just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter of her life was finally, definitively closed. "How do you feel?" Caleb asked. "Free. Actually free. For the first time since I discovered his fraud." She looked at him. "He can't touch me anymore. Can't threaten or hurt or haunt. He's just gone." Good. Yeah, good. They sat on their porch that evening, older now and slower but still together. Mara's hair was more gray than dark. Caleb's limp had returned with age, his leg never quite forgiving the old injury. "We've had a good life," Mara said. "We have. Not easy, not perfect, but good. Better than good." She leaned against him. "I love you, Caleb Rourke, even after all these years." "I love you too, Mara Rourke, even though you're still stubborn and difficult. And you're still grumpy and impossible." Perfect match, then. Perfect. The mountain sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere below, the town they'd helped build was settling in for the night. Smoke rose from chimneys, lights appeared in windows. Life continued, steady and sure. They'd survived. More than that, they'd thrived. They'd taken the worst the world could throw at them and built something beautiful from the wreckage. And as they sat there together, watching the day end and the stars emerge, they knew one simple truth. They'd been broken. Both of them. Shattered by life and circumstance and violence. But broken things, when put back together carefully, with patience and love and stubborn refusal to give up, those things become stronger than they ever were whole. The mountain had tried to break them. Instead, it had forged them into something unbreakable, and that was worth everything. The end.